Dhamma greetings. My name is Rahula. I'm a student of Bhikkhu Candana, and I just wanted to share a thank you before watching, and just to let you know that Bhikkhu Candana is a wandering monk, and he basically depends totally on donations for food, shelter, transport, and medicine. So if you find this video beneficial and it's fruitful in your life, a dana or donation would be greatly appreciated. So enjoy. So one thing to say would be, how difficult is it to be a real bhikkhu in modern day times? Like really trying to practice the Dhamma, the Buddha's Dhamma, not institutions. I think that's something that would be good for you to kind of share with people. One thing is your Dhamma talks. I guess the purpose of this is to actually try and get you as a human being, like as a person that people can relate
to. I actually, I'm glad to be asked this question because it's, as you said, it's very down to earth. It might not come across during the Dhamma talks, and that's why I really welcome this opportunity to address that question. As to how difficult or how is it to be, as you put it, real bhikkhu. To have it be defined as real bhikkhu, we can look at the suttas and the life of the Lord Buddha and superimpose it today, to this world, to the 21st century. And I can say it's easy if we know where we are anchored upon. Why we have become renunciants or bhikkhu. That's very important, because if you have the teachings, Lord Buddha did all the work for us. All we have to do is walk the path. If we're willing to walk the path, yes, it's very, very difficult. It has so many countless challenges. Starting with the support, something as mundane but nevertheless very important, existentially speaking. To have a place to live, to have that sense of security, basic needs, which I have challenged with, and I still do have major challenges. Thankfully, I have a few students and supporters who have seen value in even the decision to become a bhikkhu, in whatever capacity they can. So the financial support that comes here and there, those drops really come in handy, as they say. But the rest of it, if you know why you have become, that's why it's essential, I think, to really decide only after you've done quite an extensive research into yourself. What makes you happy? What is it that this life can no longer provide for you? This life as in the six sense stores and the pleasures and all these things, the accumulation of wealth or pursuing of wealth and prestige and status and finding a mate or having a family, all these things that many people value and equate life with or to, without which life is meaningless. So if one has reached that point of disenchantment with life, that part of it, and then you find the Dhamma, which is so fulfilling. That's why I say it's quite easy. Because you're no longer going to fight yourself anymore. You're no longer going to be in combat mode with trying to make sense of why am I still doing this. You're not running away. So, making sure you're not running away, I think it also helps you tremendously. because many people think of it as, oh, you are escaping life, or you're running away from responsibilities. Try wearing the robes for one day. Try walking around your familiar neighborhood, or a culture that doesn't recognize what these robes are, and everything else that goes along with it.
It's like another interesting thing to talk about is that, like, about the robes. Like, so people are accepting, like, in our modern world, we accept fashion. Like, anyone can wear anything. It seems to be okay. You know, I can dress up like a woman, I can dress up like a cat or a dog, or anything like that. But if I chose to wear robes, it seems to have, like, but it doesn't matter, it's going to be edited. But you know, like, when you choose to wear robes, for example, you're taking on, like, you're doing it for another reason. But the response from other people seems to be like a lot. It's kind of really doing something to it, which is interesting. Like, it's bringing up a lot of things in someone. Like, you know, someone shaves their head, walks down the street. It's not a big deal. They can wear a pink trench coat. You're like, oh. But then if someone's wearing robes, it's kind of, it really goes, like, it's a clash, I guess.
It's a clash.
Like a big clash. Like, it's like the, you know, because then basically people say, well, it's harder to live a life like a monk in a modern world, but you're not a monk, you know, like, you know, because you're not wearing robes. So basically, what I kind of would like you to explain, I think would be nice, is that how important is not to, like, judgment, perception, and what it's doing to people as far as what happens inside them. I don't know. Does that make sense? You get what I'm trying to ask, or I kind of?
it's kind of all over the place, but it's touching on important facts about the phenomenon of a monk, especially in a Western country, a Westerner wearing robes, which is traditionally, if not always, has been seen as very Asian. So when a Westerner sees another Westerner wearing robes, not accompanied by anyone they would consider as Asian, different color skin, different features, this and that, immediately what that does is definitely, it's a clash. What I like to call it, it's a glitch in the matrix for them. Because as you said, there's many people walking around with bald heads and this and that, and you might find somebody wearing something like this. Or you might have someone who will do some obscene things on the road, on the street, surrounded by people. They have a better, how should I say this? It's easier for them to process that and to kind of push it aside and normalize it, ignoring it, than it is for a person who is a bhikkhu, who is walking, like in a place like Budapest today. On the way here, people were, locals were talking and they started laughing. They started talking to each other as they were walking on the sidewalk, looking at me, and then continuing to laugh. I didn't understand, but you can see something was triggered in them. So there was a reaction, coming to your point, to your question. Yes. Now, what I find to be even more important is, again, according to the Dhamma, is what we are encouraged to do, is to see what is happening in the mind, our mind. So the emphasis is not as much about the other person and their reaction, but what it does, what it generates in your mind, one's own mind. Because obviously I saw something. And there might be also my preconditioned notions or narratives or issues growing up of being, let's say, singled out or made fun of. That kind of thing, might come up. For everyone might be different. However, when you're being singled out, people are having a reaction to you. That, as long as you're an organic being, organism, you need to have a response to that stimuli. That's how you know. That's one of the qualities of an organism. If there is a stimuli, there needs to be a response. That's one of the qualifications for an organism. That's what we teach in biology. That's what I taught, for years as a high school teacher in biology. So basically, it's the same thing. So I look at it as an interesting experiment in Dhamma practice. So it turns my day into a retreat. Retreat doesn't happen in some kuti, some hut, somewhere in a monastery or in a village or somewhere in the mountains in a cave. No, not necessarily. The real action is when you are surrounded by people, and that's one of the reasons why I like to think that Lord Buddha, whenever he would send the bhikkhus out, including himself, to Pindapata, to alms rounds, into the villages, it wasn't like it was always, nice, dandy, everything, everyone is like, welcoming. Some people used to make fun of the bhikkhus, including they used to make fun of Lord Buddha. Some people, they would call them, oh, here comes the bald heads, because they were walking around in India, which it wasn't like always, or had the understanding of Buddhism, what the Buddha was teaching. To them, it was like too foreign, so people like to put you in a box. So in this case, coming back to your original question, seeing me in robes, they have to do a check-in with themselves. What is this? They're doing in academia, it's called hermeneutics. So they're doing a lot of interpretative, I guess, calculations in their mind to see what is this. Is this a threat? No. Is this weird? No. Is this a crazy person? No. That's why you're still there in front of them. They didn't push you aside like they did with the other crazy person. So now they have to negotiate, because you're walking in a very solemn manner. You're alert. You're mindful. You're not doing anything obscene. You're not wearing anything obscene. You're hiding yourself in the clothing, in the robes, which are unusual. They don't have any insignia on it, no logos, you're not wearing any beads. You're not wearing any watches. As a bhikkhu, we're not allowed to wear any beads, any watches. So now it is creating stress, difficulties in the mind of the observer. So at that point, they might just choose to look away, make fun of, or talk about, or just change the subject, completely ignore. All of these things don't matter as far as we're concerned, the bhikkhu is concerned. What is this doing to the mind? Is there a feeling that arose? Typically there is, because there's this response, I said, to the stimuli. Okay? The response comes because of the contact that was made. Because there was an eye, there are forms, eye consciousness. Because of the eye consciousness, next thing to happen is, as a result of these three coming together, you have contact. Phassa, we call it. Contact. Boom, the touch. He saw me. Or a sound. That comes, that was the visual one. The sound, the ear, together, ear consciousness. Boom, together, they're laughing. And then comes the feeling. How is this? Maybe it's neutral. But then it quickly can go back to my frame of reference, narrative. Might be seen as, oh, when people laugh around me, they're laughing at me. Immediately, those are also perceptions and papanchas. Now we're in papancha land, which turns into painful feeling. Who's feeling? My painful feeling. As a result of what? Because of this. So now I have a position against that. Or this against that. Boom, the clash really starts. So this is the real clash that we have to be careful about. So you see, there's a lot going on. Because the easiest thing in the world is to say, they're making fun of me or my teacher or something. That's easy. That's the way of the putujjana, the unlearned, dense person's, reaction, the normal, ordinary, uneducated, unlearned in the Dhamma. That's what most people do. But a true bhikkhu is not most people. It's not supposed to. Anyhow, that's why we go for it. Is this
Yeah, that's great.
answering?
Yeah, and so another one on the thing. So as a monk, like as monks, like generally people from the West, they have a perception on Buddhism, for
Mm.
example. So um, they think about, you know, watching things, statues, like Fat Buddha, Dalai Lama, all this type of stuff, right? And then you've got people that go to Thailand and visit holidays, and they have some form of exposure to like a Buddhism which doesn't really go with what the Buddha teaches. So, you know, like monks waiting for dana, like just money, like photos, all this type of stuff. There's a lot of that. So people have this view on Buddhism that, you know, that they belong to a monastery, that there's something behind them, and it's like, I don't know what like the perception of it is, but like if you could explain, for example, like these monks that identify with a temple or with a certain teacher or a lineage and all that type of stuff, how it affects their ego, and even as a monk, what ego is in the eyes of the Buddha, and what the purpose of being in this body is for, like really. Like there's a healthy side of the ego, or there's an unhealthy side, like because people say, oh yeah, your ego, but you've got a very negative context. You're stuck in this for it. So I think it would be nice if you can kind of maybe bring all that
I
in.
could try.
Try and bring all those points, something like bring all that in together in a way
Yes.
where you can, like the dangers of things that happen when you're not practicing the path, and the stereotype that people have.
Well, we don't have the term ego in Buddhism, in Dhamma proper. However, we have different. It's a recent, compared to Buddhism and Dhamma, it's a recent development as such to be introduced in the lexicon of Buddhism, as it were. But we have plenty of other terms that actually flesh out more details, give you more three-dimensional understanding of what is being referred to as ego. So how you formulated it in your question, there's this thing called asmimana, the conceit I am, which is at the crux of the problem, which comes from ignorance, by the way. Ignorance is at the core. Because of ignorance, there's suffering. So when a person is becoming ego-driven, it really doesn't matter whether they're Buddhist monks, bhikkhus, or not. Because you have a lot of, unfortunately, people are people, If they are not, Lord Buddha talks about this in the Vimamsaka Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, middle-length discourses. Vimamsaka Sutta is this beautiful sutta on the investigation that needs to be applied, done by students. Any student, any person, in fact, who is coming face to face with a teacher, a potential teacher, so that you know who is a teacher and who is not. So I think that question fits in beautifully with that sutta, because Lord Buddha scrutinized even himself, the king of the Dhamma, Lord of the Dhamma, himself. He said, don't just follow me, don't just follow this teacher because you see them being humble, or saying, no, I can't accept this money. Or look at him, he's not after that much publicity, or he doesn't look at him. He wants to sit there while other people are walking around. He wants to meditate in the middle of the crowd. Wow. Nice, but he says, don't agree to it, don't disapprove of it either. Wait, he says. Wait. Once you've spent some time with them, or they ended up coming to great wealth. Somebody donates a lot of money to them. A big temple, big monastery. Or now they're sitting with the king of somebody, king of Thailand, or president of Sri Lanka, and the Sri Lankan president is serving tea or coffee to them. What is happening in them? This humble person who was sitting there pretending to be meditating, Now it's a pretension. You see it now. But earlier, if you were just mesmerized by what you saw, you might have misconstrued what was happening. So Lord Buddha says, don't judge, don't flatter, don't compliment either. Don't do anything, just observe. But investigate with wisdom. Because unfortunately you have a lot of that today. Because what people think is, unfortunately, a lot, in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, in Burma, in other places, not just those, because those are typically the most Theravadas. There's other places, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, and other places that have Theravada also. But those are mostly saturated with Theravada, more than anything. And now the West. So a person sees, they are going to go with the visual, what they see. Or, in today's day and age, in the 21st century, what is the following? How big is this person? That's what they know. Many people still do, mistakenly, think of the Dalai Lama, for example, because you mentioned Dalai Lama, as the head of Buddhism, which is a complete mistake, erroneous understanding or interpretation of it. He's the head of one small school of Buddhism within Tibetan Buddhism, which is a much later tradition that came about in the history of the Sasana in Tibet. So I have to sometimes correct people, and then I have to give them a little bit of introduction to Buddhism as to what is what, and because they ask. Sometimes people are very curious, which is a good thing. And then comes a few times during the last 3 or 4 years, I've had people say, "Well, why is the Buddha so fat?" I'm sorry. The Buddha, the depiction of the Buddha is fat. He's laughing. He's not wearing anything, and waist up. And I said, "I'm sorry. Hold on. Unfortunately, that has nothing to do with Buddhism, first, and unfortunately, it is not been corrected. Recently, a few months ago, actually about 6 months ago, I was in Thailand at a very, very famous Theravada Thai. Usually, Thai Buddhists are usually Theravada, and this was also very well known, where you have the reclining Buddha statue, well known throughout the world, biggest reclining Buddha, covered up, with gold leaves and all that. Famous people, presidents, kings, whenever they go to Thailand, usually they also make a stopover to go see it. To my surprise, as I was just looking around, I also saw a huge statue of that character, who is not Buddhist, by the way. But it is at a Buddhist temple, a big golden statue of this big fat person sitting there, laughing. Has nothing to do with Buddhism. But, ironically enough, it is in the middle of Bangkok, a famous temple, within the compound, the courtyard, of that particularly very important temple where you have the biggest reclining Buddha statue. So if you're a newcomer, if you're not familiar with Buddhist history, most people are not, even so-called scholars, unless they've really researched these things, they're going to think that this is so their history is intertwined. In fact, there's even a possibility that it's the same thing. So it must be a Buddha. He was actually a folk character, legendary, mythological character from ancient China. A happy-go-lucky kind of a person, a hermit, who would come down from the mountains, a Taoist, by the way, legends say. He would come down into the villages, and he would always bring cheer. He would always be smiling, he would encourage people, and he had a very belly laugh. Okay? And people started giving him free food. And they noticed that they were actually having a good time. Their mood would change, and they would go home, and the next day, next week, they're actually enjoying doing the work, and therefore, because of their interaction with this person, more money was coming. more luck, more fortune, good fortune. And you have that a lot in Chinese culture. Not just Chinese, but it's permeated. You go to Vietnam, other places, it's the same. It's influence. So it became a symbol of good fortune. That's why you go to, every Chinatown you go around the world, in any major city, you will find this character in one form or another in almost every store, every restaurant. And people mistakenly who don't come from a Buddhist, even unfortunately Buddhists, because they're not being taught proper Dhamma. With that, I'm trying to touch upon the second portion of your question. A lot is being sold to the public, emphasis on sold, underline, as Dhamma when it's not. People are thinking that making a donation is equivalent to being a good Buddhist. It is not. People were donating money long before the Buddha showed up, long before the Dhamma was revealed to humanity. But it was still considered dark ages. Dark because there's ignorance. Simply by doing good, being generous, does not mean you're pulling yourself out of ignorance. At the most, you will gain the merits of those good actions, even though they're intentionally done. Wonderful, you will gain those. But it does not mean you're going to become wise. The Dhamma is all about wisdom, which involves the person being honest. In this case, the bhikkhus who are running the temples, who are accepting the donations. Yes, earlier I was saying how important it is to get that sustenance, but there's a limit. How much do I need? How many acres do I need? How many temples do I need? Why do I need a stupa? Why do I need so many? Why do I need to have them be covered in gold? Why do I need so many statues of Buddhas? Because what happens is, the monks are being, even in monasteries, in the jungles. They're always engaged in building something. Well, guess what? Mara loves that. Mara is we call him, it's the equivalent of Satan in Judeo-Christian religion. In Buddhism, is the evil one, because he distracts you from the work that needs to be done. And if I'm in robes, I'm not here to build roads, or yes, if there's something that's causing problems that needs to be fixed, eventually we have to come together and build something. Fine. That should not become the primary work that we do. The primary work is here. Because people love observable things. People relate to that. It's easy. It's cheap. Even though if it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars, it's still cheaper than having a moment of aditana, to push through your ignorance, to push through your negative habits, hindrances. When you can't sit to meditate, for example, and those few minutes feel like they're hours or days. The person says, you know what, I've had people say, Bhante, I'm not very good with sitting. I would say, okay, you're not good with sitting, but you do sit at the office. You do sit in the car. A third of your life in Los Angeles, maybe half of your life is being spent in a car, stuck in traffic, getting angry. There's your sitting. You don't have to come to a retreat to be sitting. Now the only thing I need you to include in your daily sitting practice on the freeways, in your car, is a drop of sati. Now, even that for the person is asking too much compared to the $1,000 check that he's going to write for this very famous temple or monastery, or 100,000. It's pretty ridiculous. When I hear I was in Thailand when someone said about the Thich Nhat Hanh Plum Village, and he was connected. He was basically part of the organization. Plum Village primarily started in France, so they have other branches around the world. I was surprised. that they had gathered over $25 million that they donated to some secular organization. 25 million. How? First, my question is not why did they donate? Because there's so many hungry villages in Vietnam to begin with. Because that's where Thich Nhat Hanh was from, obviously, and that's where he died. But around the world. How did you make that money? Where did it come from? So all these things are part of the investigative work that people have to do. So it behooves upon the person who's writing the check. So I had some shocked look on people's faces when I was recently in, Malaysia, I think. And I had certain individuals coming and they were asking me, they offered lunch, dana, and I accepted. And after it's customary for the bhikkhu to give a Dhamma discourse. So questions are asked and I try to answer. So one very important question was about donations. But you have a lot of people who are going and breaking sila, which is the virtuous lifestyle, living with moral values. 5 precepts for a layperson. To break them over the weekend. Go drinking, partying, doing this during the week, also lying, saying things that are not true, backstabbing, slandering, gossiping, all these things. And then over the weekend, you come, on the Sunday or Vesak or someday, you come and you write that big fat check, or go to the temple and volunteer, serve food to the monks, convincing yourself that you're doing your part. Well, what happened during the week? It's like someone coming to a loved one and saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. Meanwhile, during the week, they go and cheat on them. What if this person finds out? Do they feel protected? Are they protected to begin with? So this is deceptive. This is deceiving oneself. That's why the person asking that question was very sad, upset, angry, frustrated, in tears. So the shock part came in when I said, you are equally responsible for how this money is being spent. They asked, what do you mean? I said, how this temple, this abbot, and all these people involved in cashing that check, in building this, how it's going to be used. You have everything to do with it. So you are a silent partner, as they say in business, with this individual. But I relinquished that. I gave it away. It doesn't matter. That's why you need to be very cognizant, very aware of your responsibility, even when you're giving a penny to someone. So that's why I always stress when people offer food or a glass of water, I always say, give it with both hands. And always have a good intention. Think of someone you love. And that automatically creates something in your heart. And all of a sudden, that doesn't stay in the heart. It permeates. It pushes out from your arms, your biceps, down your forearms, into your palms, into the glass. Try it next time. In through your eyes as well. And there's a smile that comes up. And that glass of water, I guarantee it. I'm the one who tastes it after all. Every time you approach with that attitude, I guarantee it tastes so much better for the recipient and also for the giver. So it's not, I wish people would look at this like that. Because I'm inspired not, this is not a new invention. This is not my discoveries. These are simply things that I have been seeing again and again and again and again in the encounters that Lord Buddha had with lay people. The chief disciples or the Arahant disciples, the Arya Savakas, they were interacting with people. They were moving to the core. These people, these warriors that used to go to battle, that had so much wealth, palaces upon palaces, They had so much pleasure, you can't even imagine in the 21st century. These people were just frozen in their tracks when they would see Venerable Sariputta approach, for example. They were moved to quickly leave the palace. King Pasenadi, for example, or King Bimbisara, to name a few. They would leave the palace immediately. They would get on the chariots with their retinue, come close, get off the chariots, walk the rest of the forest to come quietly and pay homage to Lord Buddha so they could hear the Dhamma and be encouraged by Lord Buddha, be inspired. You do see donations, as in the case of Anathapindika and all these, Visakha, Lady Visakha, but we have substituted the faith. That's true faith, the way I see it. When the Dhamma moves you so much that you carry it, you bring it into your life. Just like that person who loves their partner, their wife, their husband, so much that when there is the opportunity to cheat, they immediately look away. Why though? Because they are sitting in the embrace of love towards that person. It's unthinkable for them. That is the faith that I'm talking about. That's saddha. You can think of it like that. Conviction. They are moved. And that is what's number one requirement to practice precepts. But every time you do, that adds more fuel into your saddha bucket, into the oil lamp, as it were. So conceit is the ego. Unfortunately, most of these things most of the problems in the sasana, which is the Lord Buddha's dispensation, what we call Buddhism as such, in all its facets, that is primarily the problem that I see. Conceit. Because that person who was humble, once he's surrounded by such supporters, this and that, big checks coming in, people giving so much respect, giving them bigger and bigger chairs. What is that giving them? Flame is rising up, the flame of conceit. They forget why they became bhikkhus in the first place. So many people, unfortunately, I was addressing this last weekend in a talk on Rattapala Sutta, which I covered. What people are forgetting is the correct reason why a person should become a bhikkhu. It has become a means to an end. It does have that means to an end formula somewhere. If the person is coming from the right premise. If they're walking away from life, because this robe gives you protection also. It creates this distance between you and those habits, you and those old friends, encounters or companionships. Immediately they start to kind of wane and die off. It's like an extension of your body that you don't use. It falls off. Like a muscle that you don't use. It dies, it atrophies. So it does give you that protection. So you're not running when people call you, hey, are we going to go out partying this weekend? You're like, already they will remove you from their phone, from their contact list. So you see, it has helped you so you could be on the path. So in that sense, yes, it is a means to an end, because you don't have to deal with the headache of other things that never inspired you. But to look at becoming a bhikkhu as a means to an end to gain more prestige, celebrity status, unfortunately, these people who would never amount to anything in society, suddenly they're the abbot of this or that temple. Guess what? You see this around the world. In the past I used to say you see this in Asia. Not only in Asia. So it's understandable where people are thinking of, that's the new thing. I mean, look at Dalai Lama. He's the famous hobnobs, rubs elbows with celebrities, kings, What is that? wearing baseball hats, gold chains. What is that?
And what about what you're saying now? A good way to explain as a bhikkhu, like you buy it like pretty much by yourself, without having a monastery and all that. How are you received by other bhikkhus? Like, I mean, based on what the Buddha teaches, like my door, like any monastery should be an inn for you, like a place of refuge for you. Like, I mean, especially in modern times where there's not many people that are accepting of you, strangers and cultures and that. How about Theravada monks in general? How do they see you? If you were knocking on someone's door tomorrow, like, and said, "Hey, I'm here," what happened?
Well, it's my hesitation in responding should say something. One can be easily mistaken in assuming or romanticizing the way it was at the time of Lord Buddha, where the Sangha was, we call it the Sangha of the Four Quarters. Each monastery belongs to the Sangha of the Four Quarters. It doesn't belong to the abbot. It doesn't belong to the Dayak, as they're called. Dayak are the supporters, usually lay people. If you go by the book, as they say, the four quarters. That means the four corners of the world, whenever Sangha members show up at a temple, the doors should be flung open from the inside. But Lord Buddha also, there's different categories of bhikkhus in the sense of where we dwell, lodging-wise. One of the first ones is actually open sky dweller. Nothing to cover you, not even a tree. There were bhikkhus which turned into, this was one of the dhutangas, which is extreme austere practices. Build strong, willpower, and many, many merits and things are generated. The second one is tree dweller, meaning at the root of a tree. It could be a cave dweller. But as far as how I have been received, some places I have gone to, there was, because I'm a Westerner, and I became a bhikkhu later in life, although I have been surrounded by, I've always merged myself, thrown myself into primarily the Theravada bhikkhu circles, where all my teachers were Theravada, Mahatheras. Maha means great, Thera means old, or elder rather. Bhikkhus are called Theras, by the way. So Mahathera means who has had many years as a bhikkhu. So I have seen that, and many people don't know that. Many people don't see that, especially when we talk Dhamma. What was the reaction? Intimidation. People are people. Especially when they see that you have students even before becoming a bhikkhu, which is not the protocol, not what you see normally happen. Where you're, as a novice or as a young bhikkhu, this and that. So they did not come up the ranks, as it were, like that. I have not come across a bhikkhu other than my own upajjhaya, my own preceptor, who ordained me, gave me both the ordinations, the novice and higher ordination, upasampada, who saw that. And that was one of the reasons why I agreed to ordain. Because for me, it was like that was the only thing. Either that or there was no purpose in life for me other than becoming a bhikkhu. But I had already been struggling for many, many years, and many places I had gone to, sadly, I have to add, many of the monks that I had been associated with for all these years, when they became abbots of their own temples, and their teachers, who were my teacher as well, in one particular case, died. The teacher who wanted me to become a bhikkhu since I was 20-something. But my father said no. He didn't give me permission. Later, when my dad did give me the permission, my teacher had long been dead. Now the new abbots, whom I knew when their hair was dark, but now they're abbots, they did not approve. So I was exposed to much, I would even say clearly, racism, where I was told that as a Westerner I cannot ordain as upasampada, as a high ordained bhikkhu, basically. That's upasampada, high ordination. That was in Sri Lanka, basically, which I found very odd, very wrong, because it's totally against the Sangha's rules. There's no such thing, because Sri Lankans are not, Sri Lankans are not Indian, but they have had they're part of the Sangha, of course, for over 2,000 years. Over. So, and the same goes with other traditions, like in Burma, this and that. So they were not coming from the race of Lord Buddha. So this was all like made up. So you have the cultural biases playing, which people don't talk about. I was unfortunately exposed to that. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to was to become a bhikkhu with my upajjhaya, my preceptor, a Burmese monk, Elder Mahatera, along with 7 other bhikkhus from different parts of Burma and Sri Lanka, who presided over the ceremony. So one of the first things that I asked my potential upajjhaya was whether I would be able to teach. And you see this, very rarely in the history of the Dhamma. But it happens. You had lay people even at the time of Lord Buddha, like Chitta, Hattaka Valavi, among others. Kujuttara, the slave girl, who was bringing flowers in Queen Samavati's palace every day, who taught them the Dhamma. Because every day she would go and listen to Lord Buddha's sermons. That's how we have the Itivuttaka, the actual book, Itivuttaka. Thus have I heard Lord Buddha speak, basically. That's how you can formulate it, translate it. So anyhow, those were factors that made individuals be afraid to allow me in. And if allowing me in, they usually would have, initially even, telling me that I can only stay there for a very brief time at that temple. Or they would make it very difficult for me, forcing me to leave. These are scenarios that I have actually experienced. And it's very difficult when you have left everything behind. Your career, your practice as a psychotherapist. You give all that up. Your life as a layman, where you're not running away from anything. You can make very good money. And that's because it was a very difficult position. I was between a rock and a hard place, as it were. I had friends and colleagues who pretty much were so upset that severed their connection with me. Friends, over 2 decades long relationship, close relationship. They ended it because I walked away from a very successful practice. A PhD that I had worked for over 15 years. Just a PhD. Doing the dissertation. They couldn't understand why I was making this choice. So, and then you have the other side. The bhikkhus, where I wanted to find comfort, because Lord Buddha says, as bhikkhus you have left mother and father. You must be father and mother to each other. I didn't see that, unfortunately. But ultimately, the Dhamma is my mother and father. And I am every day so appreciative and grateful for Lord Buddha because I've never gone hungry. I've always found a place to sleep. And above all, I've been able to teach and go around the world and help students and share the Dhamma with people, despite the fact that no temple opened its doors. Of course, people were making excuses of this, what the world has been dealing with, pandemic and whatnot. People closed their gates. Temples started closing their gates and saying, "Oh, we don't want to endanger the monks." But I'm a monk. I'm a bhikkhu. What happened to that four corners? What happened to that? So it all becomes lip service, ultimately, because we're talking about primal instincts of people, which negates the whole Dhamma portion of why a person is in robes. So what I'm talking about in one word is hypocrisy, which we're living in. So Buddhism or the Sasana or the Sangha is not immune to it. In fact, this is something that has been there since the time of Lord Buddha. So I hope this...
Yeah, it's good. And how about for like parents or children that are able to understand English and absorb? How would you explain like the principles of the Dhamma and fundamental things that Lord Buddha will teach people as a means to helping them understand what they are, and so not so much from like a real practical thing to understand the practice and the benefits of it. What's the point of doing things?
If you want to narrow down the Dhamma into simple terms, which I found to be the best, not just for teaching it to children, but anyone. About 3 weeks ago, I mentioned this somewhere else in a recent talk. I had just arrived to Budapest and I was walking with my student, and two young men rushed towards me, and they were respectful. I found out they were from Slovakia, and I think it might have been the first time that they were meeting a Buddhist monk. With big, gleaming and beautiful smiles, they were very respectful. With their hands in Anjali, they said, "Excuse us for stopping you, but I have a question." And one of them looked at the other, and the other one looked at him. They were both smiling. I said, "Go ahead, tell me, it's okay." And he said, "What's the purpose of all this? What's the purpose? You being a monk, and you're a monk, right?" And you said, yes, I'm a Buddhist monk. And so he repeated, "What is this?" And I said, "To get rid of suffering." "Is that what Buddhism teaches?" I said, "Yes. To get rid of suffering." In fact, not just what Buddhism says. You go everywhere. Any religion you want, anything that calls itself religion and gives itself that higher calling, that prestige, that role that brings a sense of fulfillment in people's lives. They all agree with this. No one's going to disagree with the reduction of suffering as being their goal. It may come in different shapes and sizes and nuances, but essentially that's it. And he stopped and he's like, "Well, how?" That was the next question. "How do you do it?" he said. I love that because it was so practical, so scientific. Okay, yes, so we narrowed this down. This is the goal, okay. How do we get there? Very legitimate question, to the point, which, by the way, you can also see demonstrated day in, day out in children. Children don't care about philosophy. They don't care about the lies. They care about the promises you make them. "I'm going to take you to get ice cream, Johnny." Okay? They're going to hold you to that. Tomorrow, if your meeting doesn't go well with your boss and you come home and you cancel on Johnny, he's never going to forget that. Why? Because he doesn't care about the other stuff. What mood you're in, this and that. You promised something. So it's very matter of fact. So the same thing here. This man was asking me, how do we get there? And I said, simple. Without getting into details. Do you like when good things happen to you? When you feel supported? When you're looking for a chair and you're really exhausted? And someone looks at you and gives you their seat in a place where there aren't any seats left, but they give it to you. Do you like that? He said, yes. When you're running late somewhere and someone says, don't worry, I'll cover for you. Really? Yes, don't worry about it. Okay, thank you. Do you like that? Yes. Do those more often to others. Just like you enjoy it, do it to others. So, and conversely, when someone comes and steals from you, when you have left your wallet here and you've been sitting here for hours, people saw you sitting here for hours, but somehow you forget your phone, your keys, your wallet, something of value to you. And you get up and you walk away and somebody comes and just snags it. And you quickly come back thinking that it's going to be there, but it's not. Do you feel protected? Do you feel safe and secure? No, you don't. This is the opposite of the first. So if you don't like that to happen to you, don't do it to others. Simple. What this is at the essence. This is the essence of Sila, what we call Sila in the Dhamma. This is the first training out of 3 trainings. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila is the building the moral fiber, having the backbone to stand up and say, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to resist my negative impulses and not say those words about my friend or this person. Well, why not? He's not here. Well, I'm going to pretend that he is, because I don't like it when people talk badly about me when I'm not there. People do this all the time. So even in absentia, your friend is actually going to be protected by you. And imagine that's you. So we start to take care of each other, which is missing severely in today's children. When the children are being raised, they lack this education, this moral education. People have, and this was done strategically in the last 100 years or so, and it's becoming worse and worse and worse. And children, which are our next generation of occupants of this planet, they're going to be confused, normalizing some very atrocious behaviors as, hey, apathy is becoming more and more accepted. People are seeing murders and things being done around them, where they have a say in disrupting that. They're not doing a thing. They're not lifting a finger. And when you look at them, you think, well, these are not bad people. They're not doing it. No, they are. They're in cahoots. They're co-conspirators with their silence. Silence is the worst. Silence is the worst, because if they have made a sound while the crime was being committed, it wouldn't be committed. When they see something. It's amazing because you have this mutualism or commensalism, and the opposite of those is parasitism. Symbiosis is the opposite. Symbiosis means everything is going nicely together. In animals, you have baboons working with certain types of gazelles in the sub-Saharan Africa, in the Serengeti. Why? The baboons can detect, because they're on the top of the trees, if there's a jaguar, a lion, or something coming in. Knowing that, the gazelles are going to just go ahead and eat their grass or whatever. In support of that, there's a mutualism, so that the gazelles are providing for the monkeys, the baboons. So I forgot which report it was, but in this case it was it escapes me. But also in the aquatic life, you have shrimp and certain types of fish. The shrimp is minding its own business, completely unafraid that a bigger fish is going to come and eat it. Why? Because there's this other fish protecting its cave. The cave that this shrimp is always busily emptying out from all the sand and gravel. So basically, it's creating a home, a domicile for both of them. But the shrimp has one of its antennae attached to the tail of the fish, because it has very poor eyesight. Hence, this fish. So this fish is keeping guard in the mouth of the cave. So this guy goes in, scoops up the sand and the gravel, dumps it, comes back while this antenna, this rope, is attached to the tail of this fish. Now, when the bigger fish comes, guess what this fish does? Moves quickly, swims quickly into the cave. Guess what the shrimp does? Goes in there as well, making room in the cave for the fish. This is something we don't see in humans anymore. This is sad. That's natural. We have this natural tendency, but we are indoctrinating children that it's okay if you become selfish. Me, me, me. Today you have world leaders who are talking about exterminating people, exterminating jobs, the downsizing. I remember when they started that term, downsizing, in the business world. They were firing people, and eventually they got to the point where they are getting rid of people, positions, and people. AI, they're pushing AI, but they're not pushing out apathy. That's the enemy. That's the enemy. Who's creating the AI? People who don't have moral fiber in their being. Who just think about me, 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 what's in it for me. Remember the asmimana I mentioned, the conceit I am? That's what it is. And to come back to that briefly, conceit in Buddhism has three aspects. We are equal to each other. This is what the elite do. People who are in power do. Gang bosses do. So they will respect each other because they're of the equal caliber of intensity of meanness, ruthlessness, or whatever. Then there is the second kind of conceit, which is, I am better than you. This is something you can call in Western psychology, like pop psychology, like superiority complex. And then there's the third kind, Buddhism says, and that is from the bottom up. So you are better than me. I am inferior to you. So that's the inferiority complex. In all these categories, what you have is basically conceit, the ego. So you see it's far more advanced than what Western psychology provides as an explanation to why do we do these things. So start with something simple. Bring it home for the child to make it relatable. What would you do if you find money? One thing that I used to do as a layman a lot in Los Angeles, you have dimes, obviously you have pennies and nickels, but you also have quarters, which make it money. Anything less than a quarter, people don't, nowadays, I haven't been living in the U.S. for several years now. But anyhow, when you have a quarter, especially for a child, when they find it, it's like, wow. So what I would do is, I noticed that I was getting also excited at one point when I found quarters on the street. So I started to every time I noticed that I have extra quarters or something, or a quarter in my pocket, and I know I'm not going to use it, I would just gently put it on the ground. Especially, I didn't want to make it like people see it, so I would open the door, my car door, and I would intentionally, accidentally, drop the quarter right there, hoping that a child would see it. Because I've also seen quarters. I would pick them up and imagine the joy in the face of a child when they find the quarter. So if that child does that, or you say that to a child, how does it feel when you find that quarter, Johnny? Oh, it feels great. Okay, would you like to give that opportunity to another kid? I don't know, it's my quarter. Yeah, but remember how it felt? Yeah, here's a quarter, Johnny. Here's two, actually. One for you, one for him. But I don't know him. That's okay. They'll thank you. They'll be happy. You know? So there's so many examples that we can help with. And don't be afraid to be creative. Essentially, when you are practicing generosity, when you're practicing sila especially, morality, it's not imposing your will on someone else. It's actually protecting yourself and, by extension, the other person. Because when I leave my wallet here, or when you leave your wallet here, and I practice non-stealing, not taking what is not mine, which is the second law of the precept in the Dhamma, guess what? I have protected you as well. Because you're going to rush back and think, oh, it's gone, it's lost. Somebody stole it, must have taken it. And you go and you see the wallet. And I'm sitting right here, keeping guard, protecting. If we are like that with each other, it's just wonderful. This world really will be. It's not, world peace, this, that, UN, this, that. They talk about it in big, in the Vatican, this places, that places. Big words. Big words. No substance, no action. Lord Buddha gave the formula. It's very simple. You don't have to be a Buddhist to practice it. Everybody wants to feel protected. Especially children. So first be truthful. If you can't take Johnny to the ice cream, explain to him what happened. He'll appreciate it. Probably he will tell you, Dad, don't worry. Uncle, don't worry. We'll go some other time. Because you have shared with them your humanness. You didn't ignore his humanity. We forget these very basic principles. We overcomplicate things. We don't have to. And the Dhamma is not complicated when you think of it like that.
It's good. You good?
Yeah.
How can people put into practice what would be the best things for people to try and promote awareness in their day-to-day life, like simple exercises that they can do, whether they're like driving or work, from a perspective, whether it's anicca or anicca, different things that can help people, like in their day-to-day. Like that gratitude thing is tool or other tools.
Oh, there's many tools, but it comes down to realizing the urgency. Can you delay your breath indefinitely? Can you say, no, I'm going to breathe 2 weeks from now? You can't. Sooner or later, you're going to turn blue and you're going to have to, you have to breathe. So we understand urgency when it comes to life and death situations. So death has a special, unique place when it comes to bringing awareness. So they're very much connected. The urgency of death. It means urgency of life. We have to be appreciating life. Unfortunately, as a culture, we've become very afraid of even discussing that or mentioning the word. Meanwhile, it's guaranteed to happen. If you were born, you're going to die, Lord Buddha says. Sorry. Are you born? Yes, you're going to die. Guaranteed. And in fact, not just you. Everything that had a beginning is going to end, including this cosmos. It's happening all the time, and stars are blowing up all the time. Planets are, reaching the end. So, without really going too out there and making it more pertinent to your question, imagine this. Imagine you get a call. Somebody texts you, somebody very frantically tells you, we have 10 minutes left, or 5 minutes left. Why? There's an asteroid coming. Guaranteed. They're announcing it all over the news. Aren't you paying attention? No, I didn't know. I was walking. How would you live your life differently? How? Would you live it differently? I think you would. Now, I'm not promoting panic. What I'm promoting is the aliveness that happens immediately. Suddenly you're breathing. Suddenly you notice your pulse. When you're running out of air and you're diving in the water, you suddenly feel the urgency when your air is running out. Every single tiny little milliliter cube of air becomes extremely valuable. You are present. You are very aware. Why? Because you've just tapped into something very primal. Thanks to what Lord Buddha called Sangvega. This is what people who become bhikkhus for the right reasons have realized. That there is no more escape. They need to push themselves right in between, right there in the crosshairs of life. They're at the tip of the spearhead of urgency. That's how they're living their lives. That's why they treat the Dhamma with so much respect. That's why we call it the jewel, out of the 3 jewels. The 3 jewels, triple gem. What is that?
What is the triple gem?
Oh, triple gem is the Dhamma, the Sangha, and above them all, the one who revealed the Dhamma to us, Lord Buddha. So we take, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, that's the first that we say, out of, the 3, and then we say Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. And then we say Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Unfortunately, what many people do take refuge in is Kilesang Saranang Gacchami. I take refuge in the kileshas, the defilements in the heart. That's what people are doing.
When you say the word Buddha, what does that mean? Because everyone perceives the Buddha to be like a superhuman person, or something anonymity.
Oh, it's over there in that other universe that when you die you're going to go there. None of that. That's all mumbo jumbo. It never was the teaching of Lord Buddha. But people are weak. People are, especially because people are lazy, generally in default mode. That's why Lord Buddha called humanity insane. There was another term that he would use, putujjana. That's the one that I referred to earlier. The dense person. Dense person doesn't mean a person who has never heard of the Dhamma no. You could be born in the culture of Buddhist culture. You could be a monk. You could be a monk of many years, but still very much of a putujjana. Okay? So, but Lord Buddha is the historical Buddha, the one who has taught the Dhamma to us, revealed the Dhamma to us. He is the one that we think of usually as the Buddha. It has some truth in it, obviously, but ideally, it is the Bodhi, or the Buddha, that's the root, which means awakening. enlightenment, as another word for it. So you are having the saddha, or the faith, in the awakening of this other human being, Siddhartha Gautama, who broke free, who released himself, and he opened the doors of the Dhamma, of awakening to everyone else. So, and the faith in the potentiality that you also can attain that awakening. That is what we understand ultimately as the refuge, taking refuge in. Otherwise, the person would think generally, oh, I'm taking refuge in the Buddha over there in that part of the universe.
And how does someone become awakened? For example,
that should have been basically all the questions that we've been asked today have everything to do with that.
Yeah.
So they lead to that. For that, we have the Noble Eightfold Path, which is another word for the middle path, which is another term for the Dhamma, the teachings. The Dhamma is, you can think of it as the natural order of things. It is what Lord Buddha revealed. The Dhamma is always there. But in the Dark Ages, Dark Ages where there's no more Dhamma, and that's where we're headed, by the way. When people stop practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, when people stop becoming arahants, then what that means is, it is arahants, for listeners, whoever is not awakened, fourth stage, full awakened. Lord Buddha was an arahant. So when you're taking refuge in Lord Buddha, you're also taking refuge in the fact that he was an arahant. So there's that conviction that happens through the practice. And then you see yourself also capable of attaining that, the possibility. So you're not this scum, this nothingness, this nothing. You have the potential. And the way to do that is by practicing sila. Start. But that's not where we stop, because many people think that's it. Some people practice. You go to Asia, people are just worshipping the Vinaya. No, Lord Buddha did not teach just sila. In the suttas, he also says that. You open up the Sutta Nipata, the earliest suttas, you see Lord Buddha talking about it's not just sila. And you have also the other camp that says only the second training, samadhi, mental training, mental purification. It doesn't happen without sila. Sometimes I have individuals reaching out, asking, emailing, trying to find out whether they've gone deep into the jhanas or something. And my first question has always been, how's your sila? Are you maintaining a virtuous life? And if they're honest, they will tell you, well, I do weed, I do marijuana, I go and do some of this, and I drink a little bit, but I live a decent life. I don't kill people, I don't steal. Really? There's no jhana. There's no purification of the mind. It's impossible. So, in answer to your question as to how a person can, in brief, we can say the three trainings have to be there. I mentioned the first two, sila and samadhi. The third one is panya, which is the experience of insight, which comes as a result of living a virtuous life, augmented, supported by purification of the mind, which has to come through a daily practice of awareness and mindfulness, sati and sampajanya. Meditation. Sati has to be there. And one of the best ways to support that kind of lifestyle is to base your understanding of Buddhism by going back to the teachings of Lord Buddha, the discourses, which are so full of experiences that people have had, people like you and I. Don't be fooled into thinking that was a different era and they can't relate to their situations to yours. No. You'd be amazed. So inspiring stories. Helpful stories. That's why I've been dedicating my life to recording them, and for a few years now also retranslating them completely, because I don't find them satisfactory. Because so much of the context is missing. so much of the relational aspect of the discourses as to why Lord Buddha said this. Who did he say it to? What might have been the circumstances? Because these were carried, because for over 500-600 years there was no writing method applied to the transference of the teachings. Instead, they were just recited, repeated, chanted from one monk to the other monks. That's how sacred texts used to be carried over from generation to. So imagine, 500-600 years later, it got to be written down on, carved into stone. So many of the teachings were simplified, overly, codified, said in a certain way. Mnemonic devices were used, basically, to help with the memorization. But that doesn't mean necessarily that that was exactly the wording that Lord Buddha used in this discourse. So I hope that the three trainings have to be there. And, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
I think that's good. It's getting dark.
Yeah.